Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the Astrology Report for the week commencing the 23rd of May. I'll be outlining some of the key aspects and transits taking place this week and outlining what themes they highlight to us. Before I do that though, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control us in any way, shape or form. It's just a way of understanding what the energies around us are doing so that we can then understand what spiritual lessons we can learn from them and how it can best align with these energies so that we're going with the flow of things rather than trying to fight against it and therefore causing more stress for ourselves than we need to. Now I'll start off as usual with the moon's passage through the signs. So we're starting off with the moon in Virgo. So when the moon's in Virgo, it's the time where we may be focusing on our physical and mental health. We're also looking at getting organised, rearranging our environment so that things are a lot neater and more organised and we know what's going on. Then on Thursday, this moon will move into Libra, so this will be a time where we may feel the need to connect with one another and to re-establish bridges between people and to check in with each other to see how we're getting on. On Saturday, the moon will then move into Scorpio, so this will be a time where we may be looking at seeing what our real motivations for doing things are, but this is also a time where old emotional stuff may come to the surface for us to deal with and then let go of it. So if we do experience anything arising at this time, it's important that we be present with it, and then so that we feel the emotions but then we let it go because it's no longer needed or it's no longer part of who we are. And then on Monday, the moon will enter Sagittarius, so this will be a time where we may be on a search for truth or looking at new ideas that we haven't tried before and trying to understand the natural laws of things and the deeper meaning of things or the bigger picture. And during this passage we'll have the full moon in Sagittarius. This particular full moon will have quite a lot of aspects to it, so I won't go into too much detail now. There'll be a separate report for that which can go into much more detail. But this full moon is with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius is the axis of the mind. So Gemini is the more day-to-day stuff. It's the linear logic, the perceptions and the raw data, as it were. Sagittarius is how we establish meaning or attribute meaning to things and what our underlying belief systems are. So when the moon is here, this is an opportunity for us to reflect on what impact do the beliefs we hold have on our lives. How do they shape our choices, how they shape our perceptions of things, and where do they limit us through having beliefs that are too narrow and undermine the sort of growth we could potentially achieve if we had more belief in ourselves and more belief in our capacity to achieve things. But it's also about because the thing with the mind is Gemini and Sagittarius are both mutable. They both deal with thinking and beliefs. Because they're mutable signs, this gives us a clue that at no point should our thinking patterns or our belief systems be fixed and rigid. They should always be open to new information, new ways of seeing things, and new, more empowered beliefs to come into play. Because the thing is, if the mind becomes fixed and rigid, then we start to stagnate and then we just start to die, as it were. Because if we're not open to new ways of seeing things, or not open to experiencing life as it is, then we severely limit ourselves and we prevent ourselves from becoming the best versions of ourselves because we're not prepared to entertain new ways of thinking or new ways of being, and therefore it limits what we can really do with our lives. Now, in terms of the other aspects this week, there's a few to mention. On Thursday we have an exact trine between the Sun and Mars, but this trine is in effect all week and potentially even longer. But this particular aspect indicates that our actions and desires may operate smoothly or in harmony with our sense of who we are and our sense of self-identity. But this then also means that we need to make sure that we know who we are, that we do have a clear idea of who we are beyond our conditioning. So it's what level of identity do we operate? Do we operate from ego or do we operate from the soul, as it were? So with Mars in a trine to the Sun, this may even provide us with an opportunity to observe how do we interact with things, or what level of consciousness are we operating at based on the actions and desires that we pursue. Do we pursue fleeting desires and fleeting appetites that come from the ego? Or do we have a more devoted kind of action? Are we more consistent and solidly devoted towards achieving a specific goal? And have we brought our actions and desires into alignment with the soul, as opposed to allowing it full reign to be controlled by the ego? So, but as I said, because it's a harmonious aspect, it gives us a key opportunity to see how our actions reflect who we are. And if we don't like what we're seeing, then it's also a key opportunity to change it, and to change it with relative ease. But again, things aren't forced upon us. We have to choose to engage in this. On the same day, we have an inconjunct between the Sun and Vesta. Vesta's retrograde at the moment, and she's really at the moment she's providing us with an opportunity to establish where do we maintain our commitment to being truthful and to having a high degree and solid integrity. And where do we prefer to just slide through life, to take the easy roads that is convenient but isn't actually aligned with who we are, so we're not being true to who we are. The inconjunct is a tricky aspect, because the two signs involved, in this case Gemini and Capricorn, have no common ground whatsoever. It's like trying to get oil and water to mix. Now this aspect is also about spiritual alchemy or spiritual transformation. So if we can elevate our perceptions above and beyond our normal way of seeing things, and recognise the spiritual component of both sides, we can then come from a spiritual perspective and transform both sides of this issue, and we can make sure that we align our actions, or we align our choices with that sense of purpose, or with that sense of self. So we make sure that we're being true to who we are. The following day we have an exact trine between Mercury and Pluto. So this brings us an opportunity to transform the rational mind. So Pluto, when meeting Mercury, brings on a more penetrating nature to the rational mind and the intellect, but also gives us an opportunity to transform it through purging dysfunctional thought patterns and dysfunctional perceptions. So this is an ideal time for us to look at how do we see things, and how can we transform our perception so we develop a much more keen sense of intellect, or keen sense of perception, and our minds can penetrate to the core, the heart of the matter, or the core essence, and we then have the opportunity to transform the rational mind through getting rid of old negative thought patterns. So this is an opportunity for us to pay attention to our thoughts, especially the more obsessive ones, and see where do we undermine our sense of self-worth, or undermine our capacity to act through obsessive thinking or negative thinking. At the same time, we have a trine between Jupiter and Neptune. So they're both in water signs, but Neptune being his home sign, Pisces, is going to be the stronger of the two. But when the two come together, Jupiter expansiveness and Neptune's psychic sensitivity, empathy and compassion, what we're being asked to develop here is a kindness towards all beings, or a generosity towards all beings. So when we may be tempted to snap at someone who's getting on our nerves, this gives us an opportunity to, or this aspect highlights an opportunity for us to respond in a more conscious way, or to choose a more compassionate or generous approach to situations. So rather than snapping from the ego, it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate patience, demonstrate compassion, demonstrate generosity, but we don't just show generosity to certain people in our lives. It's learning to look at it from a much more humanitarian perspective or collective perspective. How can we be kinder towards everyone and not just the people that we're close to? How can we be more generous? And by generosity, I don't necessarily mean that we have to give money or give material resources to people. We can also be generous with our time, and we can be generous in terms of our love or the energy that we invest in someone. So this doesn't mean that we go about things willy-nilly. We do need to obviously be discerning, because some people genuinely need that kind of help or that kind of generosity of spirit given to them because they're struggling with something. But other people, they're the kind that if you give them an inch, they'll take you for a mile. So we still need to be discerning in this aspect, so we're not taken advantage of, we're not exploited in that respect. But if we can still strive to be kind and compassionate towards each other, whilst maintaining healthy boundaries, because boundaries are a sign of love. Boundaries isn't something that's done to be harsh. It's there to make it clear where we're not prepared to tolerate certain behaviour. We may still love the person, but we're not prepared to be used in any kind of way like that. And also this week, from about Friday onwards, we're going to have a yod. So if you haven't heard of this term before, a yod is formed by two inconjuncts combining at a point with a sextile between two of the planets. And this is also known as the finger of God formation. So we have the Sun sextile to the North Node for a few days, and it's exact on the 29th, so the same day as the full moon. But both the North Node and the Sun are then in conjunct Saturn. So Saturn here is the peak planet, and therefore the planet for us to be trying to transform. So Saturn deals with things like structure, with limitation, with obstacles, and the necessity of developing discipline, patience and perseverance in the face of these obstacles if we truly value something. So this Finger of God formation is an opportunity for us to transform our relationship with Saturn. So rather than resenting Saturn, resenting structure, resenting responsibility, it's how can we embrace these and understand that only by taking responsibility for ourselves and responsibility for our lives can we truly achieve true freedom and true liberation. So Saturn is in Capricorn as well, so it's a home sign, so it's particularly strong at this time. And this is a time where we need to do things in moderation now. So where in the past we may have tried to bring together everything we can or try and experience everything we can, Saturn in Capricorn cautions us to engage in moderation, to learn to delay gratification so that a greater reward can be experienced down the line. And it's through taking steady, disciplined action each day towards a specific goal that we can make things manifest. But with these inconjuncts, we're being challenged to transform things through spiritual alchemy so that we recognise the necessity of this structure and discipline. We don't just compartmentalise it to one area of our lives and disregard it for everything else. So this is an opportunity for us to transform our relationship with discipline, with structure, and our perception of limitation and seeming obstacles to growth, because these obstacles are there to test our faith, to test our willingness to keep going in the face of hardship, and they also develop a much stronger character as such, because if we never face adversity, then we don't develop a particularly strong character, we don't develop any kind of resilience that we'll need later on when we face any real hardship. So it's important that we develop that resilient spirit, that we develop that stronger character that's built on discipline, patience and self-control. This isn't, by self-control, I'm talking specifically about actions here, not emotions. Because if we try and control emotions, then we end up suppressing them, and then it undermines everything else in the long run because we struggle to, or we're trying to do something that isn't right for us. So we need to remain connected with our emotions, but at the same time it's important that we have that discipline and self-control on our actions, so we know that what we're doing is right and aligned with the universal laws that govern everything. So there's a lot to take on board, but this week there's quite a lot of opportunities for transformation for us. But with the inconjunct aspects being quite dominant during the Sun's transit through Gemini, there'll also be a lot of pressure or a lot of necessity to transform the way we do things and to transform our relationship to things like discipline, our relationship with power, and our relationship with devotion. And it's important that we also make sure that during this entire time we're working on, because the Sun is in Gemini, so it's opening the mind, being prepared to entertain new ways of thinking or new ways of perceiving things, and to allow new truths which clash with our own to be evaluated and to see where does our own understanding of things, or where does our own way of perceiving limit our understanding of things, and where does it limit our perception so we don't see different ways of doing things. Because Gemini is mutable, so there's a lot of change, a lot of changing of direction, as it were. But it's also about that being prepared to face new truths and bring them together with the information that we already know to arrive at a much closer understanding of what the truth of situations are and to understand reality around us better. So I hope the week brings you much transformation and many lessons to learn. May achieve much growth in the process, but at all times the most important thing is we must remember to love ourselves through the entire process. To, if we do experience or find any parts of ourselves we don't like come to the surface, it's important that we embrace them, that we learn to love those aspects and incorporate them, because we're all dualistic in nature, we all have light and shadow, and it's only by accepting both sides that we can achieve true wholeness and true healing of ourselves, so that we feel much more confident, we feel much happier in the world, because we've embraced the different aspects of ourselves we haven't incorporated so far, and we achieve a much more holistic sense of self. So may the week bring you many blessings. Take care.